Okay, I have turned on recording. Welcome to this is March. Welcome to the March Francis Colonies Philatelic Society, United States Zoom meeting for the month. And I will tell you, we do have one scheduled for April, and at the moment I have forgotten what it is. So I will look that up while Tom is talking, and then I'll announce that at the end. But this afternoon, we've got Tom Broadhead, who is going to entertain us and educate us about the stamp bourse in Paris, the outdoor stamp bourse. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Tom. And what I'm going to do, as I always do, I will mute everybody. And then, Tom, please unmute yourself.
Yes.
Here we go. Everybody's muted.
All right. Thank you, Ken. And I will say that probably many of you have been to Paris, been to the stamp market there before. And I'm hoping that after my little talk, that we can share some personal stories of our own experiences there. I'm sure there are some interesting ones. And there may undoubtedly will be some facts about the stamp market about which you are familiar that I will not be covering in the talk, but are certainly worth sharing with everybody else. So let me go ahead and share my screen and
All right. We see the power. There we go. Now it looks like a slideshow.
okay, good. All right. So, the one thing that I find so interesting and amusing about this is, the great outdoors seems to be the last place that you would want to engage in philately between rain and wind. There are all kinds of negative influences, but nonetheless, the Paris Marché aux Timbres has been around in one way or another, since 1860. The first, let's start with how did stamp collecting come about in the first place? The Revolution of 1848 and the establishment of the Second Republic, which within a year led to the production of the first French postage stamps. In 1849, the 20 centime and the 1 franc were the first issues of the Second Republic. And only 11 years later, we have an exchange of stamps. The illustration shown here, this is a postcard that this has been cut out from some older document and pasted on. And I have been unable to determine the actual age of the document from which this was clipped. The vignette in the upper right, that was actually produced for the 1941 Art of the Stamp exposition in Paris during the war. The whole thing here is postmarked 1947, but this is as we shall see, is kind of a popular image reflecting on the early history of the stamp market and stamp exchanges in Paris. And according to this, it was in the Tuileries Garden. And if we look at a map of Paris, we see that there have been other locations around the city where stamp markets have existed. The one reference that I found said that in 1860 it was in the Palais Royal Gardens, which of course is very close to the Tuileries. By 1864, it had been moved to Luxembourg. And these movements appear to be related to the onset of influences of unsavory characters. So things would get kind of sketchy in one place, they'd move to another place. And finally, in 1887, the market became officially established, and since then, at the Marigny Square, the Carré Marigny, on land that was donated to the city specifically for the purpose of having a stamp market. Now, in my collecting of documents and other information related to the stamp market, was able to purchase a copy of L'Illustration from December 20th, 1873, and has this wonderful engraving of young people engaged in philately, and also an accompanying article that was reflected a lot of the writer's naivete about stamp collecting, but he did get an appreciation that some people were really very deeply into this collecting mania. Well, the Carré Marigny in 1848, at the time of the Revolution, and you can see the dome of the Invalides in the background, it was quite a busy place. And a lot going on here. Of course, this is like 20 years or 30 years before the stamp market became established here. And the present day location, this is an old postcard of the Marigny Square with the theater, Marigny Theater, adjacent to it. And on the map at the upper left, the blue star shows where this is located. It is essentially between the Avenue Gabriel and the Champs-Élysées. And it has been located here. The market has been located here since the 1870s. In the early 1900s, several picture postcards were produced, and I have collected a lot of these. I prefer to collect the ones that show postal utilization rather than the unused ones. More recently, reproductions of these have been made, and some of them are rather convincing looking reproductions, at least on the image side. On the back side, they clearly are reproductions, but this is one that shows that apparently among adults, at least, this was quite a dress-up affair. And this is, by the way, this is the puppet theater here on the left at the Marigny Square, and the materials that were being sold by dealers or traded were propped on metal straight back chairs that looked like cafe chairs. And then here we have some kibitzer eyeing the collections of two women. So this was not simply a man's hobby at the time. And this is one that I find this to be one of the really charming postcards. I have yet to find a postally used copy of this, but here are the typical chairs, the metal cafe style chairs. And as it says, on a rainy day, the intrepids are there to exchange and buy and sell stamps. One of the hazards of outdoor philately. Now, some of the cards that were produced in the early 1900s were used for other purposes later, including the example shown here that was printed on the back by a dealer to promote his business. And we see this happening later on also. But if you can imagine somebody propping up panels with stamps in stock pages on a straight back metal chair, and then people perusing and purchasing, it's beyond my comprehension. And this was a little little funny thing, not a postcard, but a little advertising piece for Chicory Coffee, but uh, the rather unflattering image of our hobby on the front, where you have the two young people there with the stamp exchange sign above them, that a vocation, a job, and then in the middle you have the wealthy man, a dream, and then you have the reality, and you have the poor old codger there with a backpack full of, maybe those are supposed to be stamps. But there, I have come across a lot of different items that relate to the stamp uh, street business in Paris and impressions thereof. Now, the image on the left, I think that if you look at the caption, which I found particularly amusing, since the alleged collection sold for so much because it contains stamps of the 15th and 16th centuries, uh, in which they did not exist. But that was kind of part of the naive view of philately by outsiders. And then came across this photograph of three gentlemen there, at the outdoor stamp market, with the inscription uh, on the reverse of it above, from 1937. And here's another use. Here's a photo postcard of the from 1928 that was then used as a postcard in 1930 for the International Airmail Exposition. But again, there are those straight back metal chairs, which seem to have been around for at least a century. Oh, and then the weekly uh, young people at the stamp market. And honestly, in this publication, I don't know who selected this image to promote stamp collecting, because I think that's the last thing that it does. You have this dour looking man or woman, uh, and which we'll see in the next slide. And here are some pictures from the inside of that publication, including in the center the dour person with their wares on sale, and then on the upper right, though, you have a young vendor who is selling stamps, and you see a lot of other images of people as it was in the 1930s. And as I mentioned previously, in 1941, the exposition of the art of the stamp had produced two postcards, one of which shows the 1860 image of the stamp exchange in 1860. And the other one, though, was a new artwork that was created and for the exchange, the market in 1941. And associated with that, with the exposition, a vignette was prepared with the ship in the selvage that are shown here on the left. And then by the end of the war, we actually have somebody wanting to purchase Petain stamps that had, I'm not sure if they had actually been demonetized by this point or not, but they certainly were soon after. But there was a somebody looking to the future and thinking that there might be a big market for Petain stamps. Now, whether you're using straight back chairs or the stalls, the covered stalls that exist now, this was uh, a press image that I found that I bought online, and honestly, the poor dealer there looks so cramped in this little uh, makeshift auto stamp shop. But the press thing on the back says that this is from the Marini Square. So apparently there were lots of different ways that dealers sold their wares or displayed their wares. Now, in 1960, uh, this was the centennial of at least that image that suggested the Paris Stamp Exchange in 1860. Uh, Nothing was done in France at that time about this, but in New York we had the Interphil International Stamp Show, or Interpex, and they produced uh, a cachet showing part of that design and a mention of 100 years of stamp collecting. So uh, I was surprised to see this, but delighted to have it. And then in 1963, we kind of enter another dimension, and I don't know if you recognize the gentleman in the gray jacket with his back to you. That is the great American actor James Coburn. And this is an actual scene in the Paris stamp market. And there passing through is the great actor Cary Grant. Doesn't look like he's interested in stamps, though. And there he is again, looking somewhat dour. But I find it interesting that the movie Charade, the scene in the stamp market, was actually filmed in the stamp market in Paris. This is a set that you cannot reasonably expect to be created on a sound stage in the US. This was the real thing. Now, if you're familiar with the story of Charade, you know that it was at the end of World War II. There was some treasure that had been gathered and buried. And then when someone went to dig it up, it was gone. And they couldn't figure out what had happened to it. People get killed over it. And ultimately, we find out that the cash had been converted to stamps. And I bought a copy of the DVD of Charade, and I stopped it at various scenes and took pictures with my phone, which I'm showing you here. Like, when did they first show the envelope with the stamps? And here on the left, you can barely see the 3 stamps on the envelope. And down below is a shot showing recognizably, and I'll show you close-ups in just a little bit, of the 3 stamps on the envelope. We worry today about converting our collections to cash, but here somebody had converted cash or gold to stamps. But then we see a later scene, and I think this is Cary Grant. I'm not 100% sure who's holding the gun on James Coburn. But as you can see on the envelope, the stamps, the corner with the stamps, has been torn away. Well, the stamps ended up in the possession of Audrey Hepburn's nephew, which we see here. And he went to the stamp market and was offered a bag of killware, a bag of stamps for this little piece of an envelope with 3 stamps on it, which he gladly accepted. And when it was determined that the stamps were the prize in this particular case, then they go to the stamp dealer that had traded him the stamps for the bag of mega number of stamps. And the dealer says, I was wondering how soon you would get here. So he was expecting them. And here he is holding it and then begins to explain to them what the stamps are. And here are a close-up of the three stamps that had been licked and put on this envelope. And each one is a modified design on an actual extremely rare postage stamp. And the actual stamps that these represent are these. So the Sweden, the 4-skilling red brown, is supposed to represent the famous 3-skilling Banco, which has sold for millions of dollars. The Hawaii 3 cent never existed in that denomination. The rare stamp in that set is the 2 cent. And the Moldavian 82 para bull's head never existed in that denomination, but it is extraordinarily rare as an actual 81 para stamp. So you know how they do in the movies. Sometimes more and more they use real stamps, but there were times when the photographic reproduction of postage, especially U.S. postage, was not allowed. And I think that may have been one of the things that they were attempting to do here. But certainly the movie, the prop folks, or somebody knew what three of the very rare world stamps were, and they came up with these modified versions. Okay, well, away from the movie, but going ahead to the 1970s, the time of bell-bottom jeans and platform sandals, and we see a lot of dealers with stamps that are back up in the chairs. And this, because we know from the movie that the stalls existed in 1963, this may have been the so-called wet feet area of the market, aside from the established dealers. And these are postcards, by the way. And again, in the upper left, the protective stalls. If you've been to the Musée de la Poste, you'll see that there is a reconstructed stall. They're in the museum. The postcard in the lower right, the reverse of that. Again, this is an example where somebody has printed their business information on the back of the postcard to hand out as advertising. And I've come across some other interesting images that were related to the stamp market, which is only a few days a week. And in 1988, the magazine Timbroscopy decided to create an event, the 4 Days of Marigny. This was a kind of a philatelic celebration. This was the centerfold of the issue of Timbroscopy. And in it, they talk about in the upper left is a label that they printed. And if you bought one of these labels and you had the magazine, you could attach the label to the coupon in the lower left and answer the questions given. and fill in your contact information. And if you won, then the prizes were stamps. And to the right of the fold down below, we see that one is the 20 franc Pont du Gard, and forget what. 1931 stamps. Third prize was a Monaco issue. So they really touted it up as a big event, and it caught on. And here is on the left is a complete sheet of the coupons, or the Cinderellas that the magazine produced, and then one that is canceled, postally canceled. There was a special cancellation for the 4 days of Marigny, the market of stamps. And this is the first year in 1988, which was also the year that the euro overprint stamp was produced, although the euro wasn't adopted for another 14 years. And then below in the lower right, it's an example of one of the modern reproductions of the postcards from the early 20th century, with the first day cancellation of the euro denominated, not denominated, the euro overprint stamp. And there have been other 4 days cancels, and the three that I have found are these. The one in the upper left is that I think was only used for that 1 year. The one in the upper right also had very limited use, but it was always a period of 4 days during the month of May, and at the stamp market. The one below is the second year of the stamp market, which in this particular cachet, it was a celebration of the centennial of the Eiffel Tower. But for me, the interest was the fact that it showed covered stalls from the stamp market and had the stamp market canceled. And then there are other items that are produced regularly. In 1994, CNEP issued this adhesive block for the fall salon, philatelic salon, and which shows a lot of the stalls on the right, along between the Avenue Gabriel and the Champs-Élysées. And then for many years, including up to the present, Timbroscopy magazine issues each year a design, often based on a historical event or a classic stamp. These are issued both perforated and imperforate, and this is the only one that have all of them that they have done. Most of them are really quite serious. This is the only one that actually features the stamp market, the one with Mickey and Minnie Mouse. So then in 2010, for the 150th anniversary of the stamp market, there was a philatelic issue. This is the souvenir folder with some vintage images. And within it is a souvenir sheet with images of 5 famous philatelists. And at the bottom are monochrome engraved impressions of the 4 stamp designs. So the famous philatelists, and I would have expected that these would all have been French philatelists, but they're not. So we have Franklin Roosevelt at the upper left. We have Lucien Berthelot in the upper right. We have Louis Hivert, obviously, in the middle left, Arthur Mari in the middle right, and Alberto Bellaffi, the Italian philatelist, in the bottom. But one of the things that I find to be fun is the selvage images that show the open air stamp market back in the day, back in the early days. And this is a piece that I acquired recently that had the five stamps, but also had images, more contemporary images from the outdoor market. Now, my own personal experience with the outdoor stamp market, I have been there 3 times, and the last was in 2015. And I have to say that sadly, each time, the previous times I went, I think the first time was in 1980, which it seemed to be thriving then, but it seems since then that it's really kind of declined. And in 2015, a colleague of mine here from the university, who's also a France and Colonies member, Gerald Schrodel, we went to the market and we spent most of our time at, and you may be familiar with Gerald Prinz, at his van, which was full of giant tubs of mostly recent covers, which is what I was looking for. But there were not as many of the covered stands as there used to be, and no more straight back chairs. So I will leave it right there. This has been a fun thing to collect and to look for documentary evidence of stamp market and trading, over the years since 1860. And I am still looking. This has just been kind of a sideline, but a lot of fun. So I will stop my share.
Thanks.
And welcome anybody's and everybody's personal recollections of any experiences or stories they have about the Paris outdoor stamp market.
Good deal. I see Les already has himself unmuted. You have a story, Les?
I was there in 2017, unfortunately in the pouring rain, so there's only 3 dealers.
Ah,
But
so
I did buy some nice mint World War II issues.
so you were one of the intrepids.
I was only in Paris for 2 days. So since it's only open on Thursdays and Saturdays, I didn't have a lot of choice.
Yep.
Thomas, just that postcard or picture you showed where the fellow was had the sign with the patins.
Mm-hmm.
If you speak French, that translates that he redeems those. So he would accept those as payment because those stamps were invalid.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
It's the Quebecer in me.
Yeah.
Marty,
Yeah, I've been to the market, I guess, half a dozen times over the years. Most recently, last year, the day after Bastille Day. So there weren't very many dealers there, but I met some friends and we spent about 3 hours in a local establishment talking stamps.
Oh, that's great.
I particularly, this is about 10 years ago, I met the dealer. I met Gerald Prinz, yes, but Guy Vinot. And he very kindly sold me at a very reasonable price a number of Cameroon revenue stamps, including a sheet. So I've been very pleased with the market. And if anybody has a chance to go to Paris, go to the market. It is certainly worth it, just for the atmosphere, if nothing else.
Yes.
thanks, Marty. And Howard Wunderlich sent us a chat because he said he has no video or audio. He says, I was there in April 78 on a school trip. I took the stroll by myself, but did not remember any covered stalls. Most were just tables and chairs.
Okay. Interesting.
Who else has been there with a story? Yeah, Stanford, unmute yourself, please.
I've been there a couple times over the years, and without many really memorable stories to tell, other than the scramble that occurred when the rain suddenly came up, and there was a massive scramble to protect everything.
Oh,
Yeah.
Mr. Kohlberg.
Because I get to Paris a lot. I've been there probably a dozen times. I've spent most of my time enhancing my collection of French revenues. And it was an old guy there, the only one there that had any revenues. And I seemed to be his only customer because he'd see me coming and he'd turn around to his van and he would pull out this stack of essentially approval books with a big rubber band around them, and he'd set it out. And anybody that's been there knows that there's almost no chairs to sit down. You have to stand at the stands. Well, he would take the chair from behind his table and swing it around to the front so I had a chair to sit in. I'd spend about an hour there.
wow.
Pull out a bunch of stamps. I went there one time, they're only open 3 days on the weekend. And I'm at a loss. I can't remember whether it's Friday or Saturday that they're not open. They're open Thursday and Sunday, but I don't remember if it's Friday or Saturday that they're closed. They're only open 3 of the 4 days on the weekend. But fun time. But I think the other guys are right. There are not very many stands operating.
Thanks, Dick. Anybody else want to put their hand up?
I used to collect the Paris 1925 Philatelic Exposition, the souvenir sheet of 4 stamps, and then the individual stamps on cover. And I remember being there at the market once and was shown an envelope, very, philatelic, definitely with a 5 franc stamp on it, addressed to Philadelphia. And, mail to the US was just, so common then. But I was told by the dealer that it was a rare destination.
It's Les, before we get to you, Loic Dufresne sent a note to us all too. He says, I won't go off mute because the airport is noisy, but he's been there years ago. But as Tom said, today the market is a bit of a shadow of what it was. Today I go by Rue Drouot or in the covered passages, and I agree Gerald Prince is a great dealer, very reasonable.
Yeah.
Les, come on back.
I'm only going to say I have a gentleman that I belong in the North Toronto Stamp Club with who collects anything related to the Rotary Club. And in the movie Charade, when they suddenly realize the value is in the stamps, they show very quick vignettes of the different stalls with different stamps. And there is a made-up Rotary stamp that they show, supposedly from Monaco. It's not a real stamp, but they show that one close up. And this gentleman was able to buy that from a movie prop company when it closed down. So that's one of the highlights of his collection.
Oh, yeah, that would be interesting.
Thanks, Les. That is fun. And we know there's a couple of guys in the US who collect and exhibit movie props, and their exhibits are really interesting. Mark.
Yes, just wanted to clarify. I go there frequently. I'll be there probably on Saturday this week. I wanted to confirm that it's open on Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, and closed on Friday. It's a bit unusual. So it's Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, typically from 9 a.m. till 7 p.m. or so.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. Anybody else?
a quick question rather than a story since I've never been there, but I noticed in the picture when you were sitting there, Tom, that the back of there was a van, the back of his van was full. Do a lot of the dealers actually bring that much stock in the transportation that then you can kind of request and pull and
I have never seen such a mass of material as he brings in his van from any other dealer there. Certainly, probably two or three tubs that he has would fill up a stall. So yeah, and it was just kind of a matter of we sat there and finished going through one tub and he'd bring another one out, and it was a good half day spent enjoying shopping from those.
Sounds like great fun.
And then a week later, we saw him at the big London show in a very elegant, large bourse booth with high price stuff.
Anybody else? I'm happy to say that I figured out what April is going to be. David Handelman is one of the world's foremost specialists in AR mail, return receipt request, right?
Oh.
So he agreed to put together a presentation. He has sent it to me, and I think what happened was it arrived about the time that I was getting involved in the actual March party, the Garfield Perry show, which was last weekend. So I haven't looked at it yet, but I can be sure it's good. So at the end of April, for the fourth Sunday, 3:00 Eastern, we will have David Handelman talk to us about AR, return receipt.
Great.
So, is there anything else going on that we ought to talk about today? Oh, Loic Dufresne says he's sitting in Minneapolis as he watches us. And for those of you who know him, he lives in Oregon. So
yeah,
he's on his way from Oregon to somewhere.
on his way to Paris. Wow.
Paris.
Yeah, on his way to Paris. Yeah.
Good for him. Of course it's snowing.
Yep.
Yes. All right.
Okay.
Well, I thank everybody who's been here today, as always. Tom, I especially thank you for your presentation, which is fun, like they always are. We're always looking for volunteers. If somebody will step up, we'll have one in April. May is a problem for me to host because, as some of you know, I spend Memorial Day weekend, the fourth weekend of the month usually, at the Coca-Cola 600 in Charlotte. So stamps are not high on my mind on that weekend. But we certainly could have a program hosted by somebody else, or we could we could certainly use June, July, August, etc. So if you have something of interest, as you can tell, it doesn't have to be long and complicated. And for anybody who's not a PowerPoint, I'll call them an expert. I'm happy to use your pictures and to put your words into a slide program like Tom had, and we'll share it with the group. So with that, I'm going to turn off the recording.